So, as we were saying, I'm Kay Whittington with Mississippi DEQ. I appreciate all y'all sticking around. I know that, like we were saying, we're between y'all and the reception, which is even worse than being between everybody and food. But I also especially appreciate everybody coming to hear DEQ talk. I know that in a lot of cases, everybody tries to avoid DEQs in general as much as possible. But I'm going to try to help everybody understand kind of why DEQ is here and what our involvement in this is. So you can go ahead. To do that, I'll start with a little bit about specifically Mississippi DEQ. Our mission involves not only environmental protection, but also wise economic development. And that's an important piece of everything that we do. This is the way we're organized. It's different in every state. What I do specifically at DEQ is not usually at DEQs in a lot of states. So every state has to function within whatever the parameters are for their setup. But in Mississippi, we have a commission made up of appointed citizens throughout the state that really oversee what we do, in addition to our permit board. And we have, the pollution control is kind of your typical DEQ functions, mostly dealing with quality issues, air quality, water quality, those types of things. I'm the director of the Office of Land and Water at DEQ that oversees water quantity issues throughout the state, which in a lot of states, like I said, will be in a separate agency. And then we also have our Office of Geology. A lot of times that's also in a separate agency, and then just our admin services. But I think we've seen some benefits to everything being in one agency, being able to be more consistent, the way we do things throughout the state. This is, like I said, pollution control is kind of your typical pollution functions that you think of with the DEQ. Geology does a lot of geologic investigations throughout the state, which also helps play into a lot of what I do, because so much of our water use in Mississippi is groundwater. So there's some benefits to that. We can use their drill rigs sometimes, and just a lot of different benefits of having us all together. And then Office of Land and Water Resources that I lead, we do permitting, certification, and compliance of all water use, groundwater use and surface water use throughout the state. We also have a Water Resources Management Division that does monitoring of water throughout the state, groundwater levels, surface water flows, so that we know what we can responsibly permit people to use. And then we also oversee dam safety. We know that, in the state, water, in the world, water is essential, not only for environmental purposes, but also for economic development. It's vital to our economy. But in Mississippi, also, each state is not just bounded by how their agencies are organized, but also by the water laws specific to each state. So I'll talk a little bit about how our water law determines what we do in Mississippi. But in Mississippi, the water belongs to the citizens of the state, and the Office of Land and Water that I oversee is responsible for effectively and efficiently managing that water in the best interest of the citizens. Go ahead, talk real briefly. In general, in the United States, there are kind of two doctrines of water law. There's prior appropriation, first in time, first in line. Go to the next one. Then the other one is riparian rights, and that gives you right to the water if your land is riparian to that water, groundwater and surface water. It's got the reasonable use, and as long as it doesn't unreasonably interfere. And in a lot of times in a lot of states, that is settled through court cases, lawsuits, that type of thing. What's reasonable and unreasonable. We'll go to the next one. So in Mississippi, in 1985, we became a regulated riparian state, which means you have rights to use the water riparian to your land, but you also have to have a permit from the Office of Land and Water Resources to be able to use it. Go on. And so, like I said, the water law states that the water belongs to the state, permit is required, that so DEQ staff, like myself, along with our commission and our permit board, have the responsibility and authority to regulate the use of that water for the benefit of those in the state. Go ahead. Part of that is not just protection of those resources, but also, like I said, ensuring maximum beneficial use, and also though preventing waste of water is part of our mandate. So in the Delta, we'll go to the next one. We do have a problem. There's a long-term trend in declining water levels in the aquifer that's used for irrigation in the Delta. More is being pumped out. There's been an increasing demand over time, and it is not being replenished fast enough. This shows how the demand has increased from the 80s to around 3,000 permits to now we're right at 20,000 permits just in the Mississippi Delta, and that's out of 23,000 total statewide. So you can see that why I spend a lot of my time in the Delta. We go to the next one. And this is, these maps are based on water levels measured in that aquifer that's used for irrigation and how those have changed over time. This shows the area of the aquifer that's dewatered, which does not mean that it is empty. It just means that parts of it where it is no longer full. So in 94, there was 26% of the area was no longer full. And in last year, in 2015, now we're up to 40% of that area is no longer full. So this is, it's the same aquifer under the entire Delta, and it's not a, specific to just one location. The area where this is occurring is expanding and growing over time. So that's been part of our education and outreach effort in the Delta, is that there's one aquifer shared for the Delta, so it's a Delta-wide issue. That area is growing rapidly and will continue to grow unless changes are made. We can go to the next one. We know this is not just happening in the Delta, it's happening in a lot of other states and countries. And we're trying to study and learn from what others have done. We do believe we have some advantages over some. Some parts of the country don't get over 50 inches of rain annually. Also, our aquifer characteristics do allow it to be recharged. We do see a recharge in the aquifer every year. It's in the spring, but it's just not enough to keep up with the demand. Another advantage is drinking water. This aquifer is not supplying any drinking water. It's a shallow alluvial aquifer. All the drinking water is from deeper aquifers, which is not the case in a lot of other parts of the country where you've got that competition between ag and drinking water. So the drinking water sources are deeper and confined clay layers between them, so that's good not to have that complicating factor. And then also, I'll spend a lot of time now talking about working with those in the Delta to solve this problem, and the leadership of the Delta is another advantage. Go ahead. This is how we're working together. While DEQ has the responsibility for that, we're in Jackson and not in the Delta, so we want to work with those in the Delta to help solve this problem. We established the Delta Sustainable Water Resources Task Force in 2011. There's not a silver bullet, one easy answer, and we know we all need to work together. Go ahead. This shows the members of the task force. In addition to DEQ, we have Soil and Water Conservation Commission, Delta Farm, Yazoo Water Management District, Farm Bureau, Delta Council, NRCS, and the Corps of Engineers are working on this together. The governor kind of recognized the work of this task force and formally established it 3 years after we had started this. Didn't really change what we were doing, just said this is important and recognized it. Go ahead. These are the guiding principles of the task force to, first of all, manage water as efficiently as possible, which is really the primary focus of this conference here, and just water conservation and irrigation efficiency, but also to look at storing water when it's plentiful, to use it when it's not, and then to continue to pursue every feasible alternative for the Delta. Like I said, this first one is the primary focus of, water conservation is the near-term priority. Just saw a presentation in this room, I don't know if y'all seen the others today, about how that can increase profits by saving energy, gas, fuel costs, and time. There's NRCS assistance available for a lot of these conservation practices, and they're things that can be done quickly and have immediate and significant benefits. But we know that conservation alone may not be enough to solve this problem, so go ahead. Well, this is a little bit more about a specific NRCS pilot project that we did in Mississippi. DEQ put some money up to match NRCS money to focus on, specifically just for irrigation water conservation practices. That's been received well. Demand far exceeded what was available. So when I talk about storing water when it's plentiful, to use it when it's not, and pursuing every feasible alternative, these are some of the other things that we are continuing to work on. Enhanced recharge, aquifer storage and recovery type projects, groundwater transfer, also, pumping water from an area where it is plentiful in the aquifer to an area where it's not. Using water in the streams that's there, redistributing it, use of treated effluent, well fields, again, is the kind of that idea of there are areas where there is plenty of groundwater that can be transferred to areas where they're not. Same thing with the interbasin transfers and the use of surface water, use of tailwater recovery and storage, and then also in-stream weirs are just some of the things we're talking about. Next steps is, while we have a lot of good information and individual researchers and scientists have made a lot of progress on investigating all those alternatives, it's difficult to really compare apples to apples. None of the projects are fully developed enough to be able to answer, get key questions answered for all of them in a consistent manner. One thing we're doing to help try to get those answers in a comparable format is we're working with the USGS to develop a delta-wide groundwater model to look at how the aquifer will respond to different scenarios implemented at different scales. I'll talk a little bit more about this voluntary metering. I don't know if any of y'all have heard about that program in Mississippi, but it is a key to getting better information on what is being pumped out of the aquifer, so that the model results can be more accurate. Clearly pumpage is the biggest stressor on the aquifer and something we needed to get a better handle on. We're also working with ag economists to try to get cost estimates of different alternatives in a comparable format. Also investigating funding options through the task force, continuing data collection on other key pieces and uncertainties besides just the pumpage, which we're addressing through metering. Also trying to get better information on how recharge varies across the Delta, interaction of the shallow aquifer with deeper aquifers, those types of things, and also looking at trying to make our permitting tool as effective as it can be. This is kind of an overview of the voluntary metering program. It had some interim deadlines, I guess, in the program. The first one was to have 5% of the wells in each county in the Delta with a permanent meter installed by June of 14. And that deadline was met. Then had to have that water use reported for calendar year 14 by February 1st of 15. That was also achieved. The next deadline was to have 10% of the wells in each county with a fixed meter installed by the end of December of 15. So we just met that deadline, and we are now currently in the kind of home stretch for this initial part of it, which is to have water use reported on 10% of the wells in each county by February 1st of this year. And this is where we are so far. We have, as of a couple of days ago, over 1,200 water use reports submitted to DEQ on, what was pumped last year to grow their crops. We still have that 464 number is the total needed. I got an update today. I couldn't get it updated in my slide, but we're now down to only 399 needed. So these are coming in pretty quickly now. Feeling pretty optimistic about meeting this. You can go to the next one. And the reporting is really the whole purpose of this is to improve our science and to have better information, to be able to look at how water use is geographically distributed throughout the Delta based on soil types, different crops, and just to be able to look at it over time and then, subdivide the Delta. Currently, the best information we had was about 150 water use reports for the entire Delta. So now we'll have upwards of 1,700 voluntarily reported to us annually from now on to be able to have better information on what's being pumped out. So there is an opportunity. I started it with there is a problem, but there is also an opportunity. Water can make the difference in the sustainability of the Delta. There's great potential for voluntary conservation practices to save time and money, as well as water. There is a sense of urgency, though. We know we don't have years to waste and don't have decades to find solutions, but we know that the problem can only be solved through a Delta-wide commitment and taking the long view. So that's my part of it. I'll turn it over to Buddy now. Does anybody have any questions for me while he brings his?
What's the next step? Went from 5% to 10%.
Right, 10% water use reported annually from now on is.
Well, what if that's not achieved? I think something that says word mandatory.
Right, yeah, it can go, we can require mandatory metering.
Will that still stay at the 10%?
That would have to be determined, I think, at that point. When they first started talking about mandatory, it was going to be, the way it was structured was that it would be required, meters would be required on all new and replacement wells, in addition to 10% of each person's wells. So it wouldn't be 10% of a county, it would be of a farm's wells. So,
is there still cost share through that to the NRCS?
mm-hmm.
Okay.
I got a question, and I always ask it to people that do this water deal. And the question is, I know that this metering and all this is great. And we got the biggest water going down the Mississippi River. Why can't we not, in essence, replenish the aquifers with that water? And I know you're going to say that it's because you got to clean it. But if California can clean their sewer water and drink it, we should be able to clean the Mississippi River water and pump it into the aquifers. I'm Arkansas, and you were talking about the deep aquifers. Arkansas and Stuttgart, we're down to the same aquifers that the city municipalities are getting. And so that's drinking water and all. So my deal is, I can't see why, and nobody wants to address it, and maybe you are, and you can answer them, why we can't not get people on board instead of, and don't get me wrong, I'm for all the farmers and doing what we gotta do too, because that's in the long run, but we have this natural resource water, and right now, look how much water here, you know, we could use it. And I don't see why we cannot put it back into these aquifers.
I think, you know, that's one thing we're investigating on a much smaller scale, hopefully with some pilot projects of using surface water and groundwater from different areas to inject back into the aquifer for use later. But, you know, as far as the Mississippi River, I think it's just, like you said, cost benefit as far as the cost of the treatment to get it.
And I did read that in Texas, they're doing that. They're doing river, taking the river water. And I don't forget where it was, but they're doing it. And my deal is when we use it when we got plenty. Right now we have plenty. That's just a question I asked you. I think that's a feasible way to do it.
Right. We're trying to keep all.
And you can store it, you know, like you had the storage up here, because I've done a lot of, you know, if it's underground in the aquifer, it lasts longer than on above ground because you lose a lot to evaporate. And I'll stop.